With the game against Manchester United poised at 0-0, Arsenal needed a spark. And although for some of you, Timber may have been an uncharacteristic goalscorer to put us into the lead, it felt like the perfect way to sum up a player who has been the source of so much energy to everyone on the pitch, and a player who has been one of Arsenal's best performers this season. For many of you, depending on how much of the channel that you've seen, that may not surprise you. But no matter, because today's video is going to analyse the Dutchman's influence on this Arsenal team. And as we did for Calafiori, it's vital we understand first the character Mikel Arteta sees in Jurrien Timber. This is what Mikel said a week or so ago. We know what he can produce. He's a player with exceptional qualities, a lot of leadership, and you see the courage and the intention and the purpose that he plays with. That's very contagious. Leadership and intention are words that circulate a lot through their various synonyms when Mikel speaks about Jurrien. But what's most important is how contagious these qualities are. Mikel is big on the word transmit, isn't he? He values clarity of messaging. It's why we've seen his enigmatic methods like his light bulb monologue, emphasizing a team that stays connected and are able to transmit energy to each other. To draw briefly on my own academic side, on my master's course at the moment, I've been learning about the invention of early radio and transmissions. This may seem unrelated, but it's not. With regards to Arteta's light bulb, these early transmissions were easily interfered with by static and noises on other frequencies. These other noises needed to be sounded out. The receiver needed to be perfectly aligned on the same frequency as the transmission, being in tune with one another. Those player-manager qualities that I've been pushing in this Arsenal team for a while now, haven't I? Timber encapsulates all of that. It may be with his own voice, but also with his body language and his actions on the pitch. Let's return to one final quote on Timber by Arteta now. He is a leader. He loves to be on show and be a big presence in everything we do. Being on show. Timber is someone who has suffered an ACL injury in his first season in England, but it's his ability to pick himself back up, his boisterousness, I think, and his swagger on the pitch, but also someone who clearly thinks for everyone he plays with. That is infectious, and I hope that infectiousness will equally inform now the analysis that follows as we focus on more the details on the pitch and why Jurrien Timber may just be Arsenal's most underrated player. Obviously, Timber has had to placehold quite a lot this season at left back, and without our dynamic, strong-sided left-footers and the angles that Timber likes to play at himself was certainly not the most conducive to creating that fluent left-hand side. That isn't Timber's fault at all though, and in this time he was still one of our most consistent performers, and he also showed many moments or flashes of that buzz, that progressiveness, that completeness that scales up so much when he moves to the right-hand side. With Mikel Merino, for example, we saw with Timber those seamless rotations low and high, but also inside and outside that laid the template for that revolving, dynamic right-hand side Timber is now a centrepiece of. We've also been teased with those moments of individual magic from Timber, a feint, a drop of the shoulder and drive inside that shows his snap in the pockets, or his bustling carries on the outside, or those cute interchanges with Martinelli that show how elusive and hard to contain Timber is in the small spaces too. So, unsurprisingly, when that Leicester game a month or two now came around, a game that was, can you believe it, Timber's first at right back for Arsenal if you dismiss his end of the season cameo on the final day last year against Everton and also his debut 2 pre-seasons ago against the MLS All-Stars. PSG, that performance came shortly after, and then he was shuttled back to left back before the international break, back as a placeholder, and we've now seen these last run of 4 games, Timber's presence back at right back, capped with his opener against Manchester United. So, why is he so important to our right-hand side? Why do I keep emphasising how important he is for the team as a whole? Let's start with that seminal Mikel Arteta quote I've used quite a lot now, talking in tandem about Calafiori and Timber incidentally. Once again, it is their brain, their intelligence, quality and adaptability to occupy different spaces, whether attacking or defending, giving us a different dynamic and unpredictability in attack. whether it's low in a back three, an out ball in a back four, central in a pivot or a midfield three, moving into those higher pockets or giving us an outside threat. Timber will revolve and threaten in each one of these spaces in every game. Even if sometimes he's more reserved, contained even. And that links to how, especially with Calafiori playing, Arsenal now can pivot from side to side, from one fullback to another, essentially letting one cause carnage and reign free, whilst the other modulates and settles us down. And this latter point is vital too, because to give the fullback such freedom as I'm going to go on to explain is all well and good in a system, but they have to do this in a responsible manner. That is the real intelligence Arteta is getting at here. I want to put this though as simply as possible. I think you can make a very strong argument that Timber's return to right back has had a similar level of impact as Odegaard's return. Now, that isn't meant to in some way dampen Odegaard's effect. It is actually just to make sense of the importance of Jurrien Timber by holding him up against someone as influential as Martin Odegaard is. Let's start with the build-up there and Timber's impact. And he's shown himself to be additive, I think, across the park from this point of view. When we are deep, remember those fullback outballs I've touched on a lot. Raya's built up, I think, a nice relationship for picking out Timber with these clips as we fortify players low, giving Timber license to maybe roam into pockets of space higher. Saliba too often splits wide, with Raya stepping through to play at that term good height, meaning Timber often goes high and wide, stacked on top of Saliba. Or what I like about Timber in general is just how he will see a space and without really thinking too much will just go and exploit it, like this example against Newcastle here, with Raya picking him from long this time. Finding Timber as this dynamic mover is an integral part of a fluid build-up like ours is, which swirls around, creates space for players to move into because of this, and often relies on third man movements to give us that dynamic advantage. Timber is a brilliant dismarker, which makes him great at ghosting into these blind spots, something that translates into the final third impact that he has, but also what makes Timber unique in our build-up and unique to the things that I've been touching on in recent weeks is that bar Declan Rice, Timber is our only other receiver who can just eliminate someone and carry past them in a dribble. And it's a massive luxury to add this sort of OP quality, that more immediate way out that helped us get some impetus in the second half against Manchester United. But it's also something we've spoken about adding to our build-up as a kind of final step, because if Calafiori is a big, dynamic off-ball mover, Timber, alongside this, is just the same in his 1v1 abilities dribbling. To have someone who can carry you up the pitch like Jurrien Timber can, cover these bigger spaces effectively, but also able to rotate with Odegaard when he makes those deeper swings, occupy those central pockets that we see here can sort of coincide with double inverted fullbacks at times. And when you add to this his press resistance when turning in these middle areas, we've got thrust in every sort of enclave on the pitch. Let's start moving things forward, though. We've spoken about that relationship just now with Martin Odegaard, and this is part of making our right-hand side as potent as it has been. But before we get to the final third, I want to literally talk about how we get there. In our build-up, Timber's main patterns have been, firstly, maybe staying in this back three shape, and it's important to note the enabler role that he gives William Saliba at times here, who will often sort of bob and weave and carry into midfield, with Timber counterbalancing things, forming a back three with Raya and obviously mostly Gabriel at left centre-back. Again, indirectly, adding unpredictability to how we break lines, but Timber has also got really tight to Saliba in that back three too. And against Forest, we saw that dynamic how Odegaard could threaten, swinging wide, stretching that Nottingham Forest pivot. Timber would then tuck in close to Saliba, giving Hudson-Odoi so much room to have to shadow cover in his pressing duties. And this would allow Timber to either punch it through to Jorginho or move it on to Odegaard. And that is when the excitement really begins, with Timber then bursting through the half space with this Odegaard sort of abandonment of it, where he can really start to affect things in the final third. Before we get there though, I think it's important to use this time to qualify the Timber-Ben White debate that I've answered a couple of times in the comments. Timber is, like we've seen here, a roamer at heart. He can very easily be fixed, as we have seen this season, but not in the same way that Ben White benefits from it in terms of White being a quarterback from right centre-back. He wants to play with play happening in front of him, giving him the option then to, if possible, make those arcing, overlapping runs outside of Saka. When White has been in more Timber-like zones and tight in the middle, it has been absolutely fine, but it still feels more functional here. And in the deeper zones and outside of blocks where White is more comfortable, he adds, in terms of relation to Timber, he definitely adds a passing range to his game. Timber is very reliable with passes. But I think what would be really nice to see, without being greedy of course, sprinkled in there, is I would like to see Timber's range of qualities extend to that ball striking and the passing now, if that makes sense. I'm not saying that one is necessarily better than the other. White and Timber can actually coexist as a pair, but Timber right now is part of a dynamic, fluid Arsenal that is tailor-made for his strong side fluidity at right back. So, back to that moment of Timber bursting high. We've seen this set triangle on the right-hand side more and more, haven't we? With Odegaard now measuring deeper, Timber being Saka's dynamic partner, almost. And the chef's kiss on this is how we revolve, how we rotate when we start playing same side. Remember that term Declan Rice used to describe how we will often fake to recirculate to the other side and instead continue to probe again on the side that we're playing. And when in the opposition third playing like this set, we will often see Havertz join from the centre forward or the number 6 join to give that right hand sided circuitry another body to ensure that we can always find a free man, which is quite often at the moment Timber. And when you've got Timber, Odegaard, Saka all associating, bouncing off each other, moving constantly. And where Timber is concerned, he can obviously receive in a pocket, but also how he can start to get that circuitry, like I said, revolving. He can just ghost in and beyond the back line. And here he can be a real platform, I think, for players to bounce and play off, enact give and goes or 1-2s with. There is also that real thrust that he gives us on the underlap through the half space, which pulls and pins defenders. And of course, there's that outside threat that he gives us that ties all these movements together and allows Saka too on the inside often. And after all these rotations and the opposition back line continuously readjusting, gaps inevitably open up with this same side play and these overloads. And when you have someone that's as good in tight spaces and associations like Timber, that is tailor-made for him. What I also like though about Jurrien is that obviously he adds that real bite to our tight space play, but he also, in the same way that he controls those larger spaces when he's enacting those carries, means that he can also give that bustling overlap that we assign more to someone like a Benjamin White. And you'd be excused if, against West Ham, you were caught in the glare of Bukayo Saka's dazzling feet. But look at Timber here, starting in our back line, then rampaging his way on the outside, helping create that indecision and, although he probably didn't need it here, helping Saka make his way into the box and win a penalty. We've got all these different qualities to Timber's game going forward, but what I really like and want to see more of going into the future is more of this, him getting space to make the most of that dribbling in the final third. That could be, like it is here, Odegaard being a bit more central, but what makes Timber so effective, as we've seen, is his high activity levels. He isn't a static force in his spaces. He moves in and out so intelligently, so getting him here on the outside of a block and allowing him to drive us through is going to help with our central access issues at times through that immediate dribbling, which again, we don't have sort of as a luxury across the squad, I don't think. To finish though, I want to focus on the defensive side of things. When we were initially interested in signing Timber, I remember bringing out how the intention behind signing him is trying to roll Zinchenko's value on the ball, albeit with different dynamics, with Tomiyasu's greater lockdown defensive ability. And this isn't to say that Timber is never going to get beaten by a winger, but when we are talking about someone who can control these bigger spaces so remarkably well for someone of his size, and he's also got a natural jeweler's body, I think, it's no surprise that he hasn't actually been dribbled past from fullback in an Arsenal shirt yet. Salah, Barcola, Bailey, Madueke, Doku, Johnson and Rashford momentarily against Manchester United. Some of these guys are as tricky wide men as you'll get. And I think Timber's approach to the duel is the best thing for me because he just screams someone that knows what works for him. He closes the spaces quickly, always, but when an attacker turns and is driving at him, he proactively channels them on the outside, continuing to shift across his low centre of gravity, staying in the duel. And then he sort of has that clutch mentality, doesn't he? If that makes sense, to make a last-ditch tackle, but he also just bides his moment and waits before he snaps into the tackle. Saka has already spoken about the presence of Timber behind him defensively and that reliability that he gets in being filled with the sense that he's going to be fed the ball more. But this reliability bulletproofs Timber for literally any opponent. Do you want someone who can clamp down a difficult winger? Timber is your man. You want someone to help play out of a high press or add thrust and dynamism to how we break down mid blocks or how we lockpick deep defences. Timber is your guy. And he also carries that bite and snap into our press out of possession too. He gets touch tie, and in this position, he's incredibly difficult to pin by an attacker with, again, how low to the ground he is, how aggressive he is, but also that stockiness and core strength. You're not going to spin away from him in this position, and his legs too also have a habit of stealing the ball or pinching the ball away from attackers' feet when they look like they may have created a yard from him. And above all, guys, above all this detail of analysis, Timber just seems like a great human being, doesn't he? Let's end with a set of final Arteta quotes to leave us all feeling happy as we get on with our day. He's an unbelievable player that has already earned the respect of all of us without playing. That's an unbelievable thing to do after one season. Here's another one. His teammates love him. He makes them better. The way he coaches, leads, he's the first one here. He loves the game and wants to improve. And lastly, he's a leader. A guy constantly thinking, how can I help others? For everyone to speak so highly of him, to respect him and look at him in the way they do will tell you the story of the personality we have in the team. Again, I don't want you to think I'm using hyperbole. I genuinely think that Timber has it within him to become a true world beater with this wholesale effect that he has across the team. His completeness, basically. And I also expect him, maybe with players like Jesus or Jorginho leaving, as seasons go by now, to become firmly involved with our leadership group as one of our vice captains. He's not just a special player, as I hope this video has shown you, but also a special person. And that, guys, is infectious. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. See you later.